Some trips promise adventure, others hide nightmares. When we boarded that old train, we believed we were heading to paradise. But as the journey unfolded, we realized not everyone on board was truly alive. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next terrifying stories. We were just 5 friends looking for something different, something we could brag about later. The kind of story you'd tell around a campfire, laughing about how reckless you were. The city we arrived at was forgotten by time, somewhere deep in South America. Dusty streets, old brick buildings, and a silence that made even our footsteps sound too loud. But none of that mattered to us. What mattered was the rumor, a hidden paradise only reachable by an old cargo train that ran once a week. When we found the train, it was exactly as described, rusty, worn out, and oddly still. A single passenger car attached to endless cargo, wagons. No conductor in sight, no ticket booth, just an open door as if it had been waiting for us. We climbed aboard, laughing and shoving each other like kids. That laughter died quickly when we noticed the others. 13 people already sat inside the passenger car. At first glance, they seemed normal. Men, women, even a child clutching a ragged doll. But something felt off. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They didn't even blink. "Must be locals," Raphael whispered, trying to brush off the creeping unease. We all nodded, pretending it made sense. The train jolted forward without warning, the screech of metal on metal echoing through the empty station. We settled into a corner, our camping gear piled beside us, trying to shake the feeling that we had stepped into something we didn't understand. For the first hour, we focused on the view outside. Dense forests, winding rivers, and towering mountains. It was breathtaking. Inside the train, though, the air felt heavier with every passing minute. I kept glancing at the passengers. None of them moved an inch. Not a cough, not a shift in their seats. The child's head was tilted unnaturally, her glassy eyes locked onto nothing, her doll resting stiffly on her lap. "Maybe they're asleep," Bruno suggested, though even he didn't believe his own words. It was Diego who noticed it first. His voice was barely a whisper. "Guys, that man near the door, wasn't he sitting differently before?" We all looked. The tall man in the brown coat. He was now perfectly straight, hands resting on his knees, head slightly tilted forward. His skin looked pale. Too pale. Bruno stood up, walking slowly toward him despite our protests. He reached out and lightly tapped the man's shoulder. Nothing. Bruno touched his hand and immediately recoiled cold. "Like wax," he muttered, his face draining of color. That's when I saw it. The man's eyes weren't real. They were glass. His lips were frozen in a faint, unnatural smile. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't even human anymore. A chill ran through all of us as we looked around the carriage again. The silence of the passengers now felt suffocating. Were they all like him? The train kept moving, deeper into the wilderness, as if dragging us further from any chance of escape. I wanted to believe it was a prank, that maybe this was some weird local tradition we didn't understand. But deep down I knew we had boarded the wrong train, and whatever these things were, we were trapped with them. Panic wasn't immediate. It crept in slowly, like a fog we didn't want to admit was surrounding us. We sat back down, our group huddled together, whispering theories that sounded more desperate than logical. "They're statues," Matthias said, trying to convince himself more than us. "Maybe some kind of art installation. A joke." But deep inside, none of us believed that anymore. The train rattled on, the sound of the tracks beneath us becoming a relentless reminder that we were moving farther from safety with every second. I glanced at my phone. No signal, of course. Then it happened again. Raphael let out a sharp gasp, pointing towards the woman sitting by the window. I swear, she had been breathing when we first boarded. I remembered seeing the faint rise and fall of her chest. But now she was still. Her skin had taken on that same pale, waxy texture. Her eyes were glass, another perfect, lifeless doll. "No one's getting off this train," Bruno muttered, his voice hollow. We scanned the others. They all sat frozen, but now doubt gnawed at us. Had some of them already changed while we weren't looking? Or had they always been like this? And then we heard it. A soft chime, like distant bells echoing through the carriage. It didn't come from outside, it was inside, around us. The sound was delicate, almost beautiful, but it made my stomach twist. "What was that?" Diego whispered, his eyes wide. No one answered. We didn't know. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, it was impossible to tell. And the temperature inside the train seemed to drop. Our breaths became visible in the air, and the metallic scent of rust and something sweeter, almost like old perfume, filled our noses. We tried the doors, of course. Both ends of the carriage were sealed tight. No way forward, no way back. That's when the child moved. It was the smallest motion, just her head turning ever so slightly, until her empty gaze met ours. The doll in her lap seemed to shift, too, but I couldn't be sure if it was real or if my mind was already breaking. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice cracking. No one needed to answer. We had all seen it. Suddenly, the weight of being watched pressed down on us. The passengers weren't just lifeless figures. They were aware. Waiting. We gathered our things, adrenaline starting. To replace fear with action, we needed a plan. We needed to get off that train before we became part of whatever nightmare this was. Bruno peered out the window, looking for anything. A station, a village, even a clearing where we could risk jumping. But all we saw was endless forest swallowing the tracks ahead. Then came another sound, a faint scraping, like something dragging along the wooden floorboards. Slowly, we turned our heads toward the source, the man in the brown coat. The one Bruno had touched. His head was now facing us. None of us saw him move, but there he was, staring with those lifeless glass eyes, his smile wider than before. "Enough of this," Raphael said, his voice shaking but determined. He grabbed one of the emergency hammers from the wall, the kind used to break glass. In case of accidents, he swung it at the window with all his strength. Crack! The glass splintered but didn't shatter completely. Reinforced, designed to keep things in or out. He hit it again and again, desperation fueling his strikes until, finally, a hole burst open. Shards raining onto the floor. Cold wind rushed in, along with the realization of what we had to do. "We jump," I said, my throat dry. "Are you insane? We don't even know where we are," Diego protested. "Better out there than in here," Bruno snapped, pointing at the passengers, who now all seemed closer. The space between them and us had shrunk without us noticing. The train began to slow slightly, curving along a bend, where the terrain dropped into a slope of thick vegetation. It was risky, stupid even, but staying meant ending up like them. One by one, we prepared ourselves, tightening straps, gripping our backpacks. The chime echoed again, louder this time, almost urgent. And then, just before we leapt, I made the mistake of looking back. The child was standing now, her doll dangling from one hand, her head tilted as if curious, her mouth moved. I couldn't hear the words, but I understood. "You're next." We didn't wait. Bruno jumped first, disappearing into the green blur. Diego followed, then Raphael and Mateus. I hesitated for a heartbeat too long, just enough to feel the air shift, as if invisible hands were reaching for me. I threw myself through the broken window. The last thing I heard before hitting the ground was the soft laughter of a child echoing from that cursed train. When I hit the ground, the world spun. Branches scratched my face, rocks tore at my clothes, and the weight of my backpack nearly dislocated my shoulder. But I was alive. Bruised, bleeding, but alive. I could hear the others groaning nearby as we struggled to stand up in the thick underbrush. Above us, the train continued its journey, its wheels screeching faintly in the distance until the sound vanished completely, like it had never been there at all. For a moment, none of us spoke. We just stood there, catching our breath, trying to process what had happened. The silence of the forest felt deafening compared to the oppressive atmosphere of that train. "We made it," Bruno finally whispered, though there wasn't a trace of relief in his voice. We didn't waste time. Limping and disoriented, we followed the sun's direction, hoping it would lead us toward the place we had come all this way for, the so-called paradise. Hours passed as we pushed through dense trees and uneven ground, our bodies aching with every step. And then, almost like a cruel joke, we found it. The trees opened up into a breathtaking clearing. A crystal-clear lake reflected the golden light of the setting sun. The grass was soft beneath our feet, and the distant sound of a waterfall added a surreal calm to the scene. This was it, the place we had dreamed about. We should have been celebrating, but none of us could shake off the weight of what we had escaped. Every shadow between the trees made us flinch. Every rustle of leaves felt like a threat. We set up camp in silence. No jokes, no stories, just the crackling of the fire as night swallowed the sky. We set up camp in silence. No jokes, no stories, just the crackling of the fire as night swallowed the sky. As the flames danced, I found myself staring into them, my mind replaying every moment on that train. The frozen faces, the glass eyes, the soft chime that still echoed in my ears. I could tell the others were trapped in the same thoughts. That's when Raphael broke the silence. "Did anyone else hear her?" he asked, his voice low. We all looked at him. "The girl. Before we jumped, she said something to me." Bruno nodded slowly. "Yeah, me too. I think she spoke to each of us." A cold shiver ran down my spine. I hadn't told anyone, but I heard it too. "You're next," we tried to dismiss it as stress, as trauma playing tricks on us. Eventually, one by one, the guys crawled into their tents, leaving the fire to burn down. I stayed up, unable to sleep, staring into the dying embers. And then I heard it. A faint, buzzing sound, like distant whispers mixed with static. At first, I thought it was just the wind through the trees, but it grew louder and closer. I stood up, my heart pounding in my ears. The forest around me felt heavier, as if the darkness itself was pressing in. That's when I saw the first one. Small figure standing at the edge of the clearing, half hidden by shadows. It was a doll. No, a person, no. Something in between. Its porcelain face gleamed under the moonlight, expressionless, yet somehow aware. Then another appeared, and another. Within minutes, dozens of them emerged from the forest, silently, surrounding our camp. My mouth went dry as I stumbled backward toward the tents, my voice caught in my throat. In the center of the circle they formed, I noticed something that nearly made me collapse. 5 more figures stood there, lifeless, stiff, wearing our clothes, exact replicas of us. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The buzzing grew unbearable as the dolls began their ritual, moving in slow, deliberate motions around the copies of ourselves. Then one of them reached out and touched the me standing in the center. A sharp, burning pain shot through my chest, and my legs buckled. From inside the tents, I heard my friends crying out in pain, each of them feeling it too. We hadn't escaped. The train had followed us, or worse. We had brought them with us. I forced myself to stand, every muscle in my body tense and trembling. The burning sensation where the doll had touched my replica still pulsed under my skin, like a warning that this was only the beginning. The clearing was completely surrounded now. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of those lifeless figures stood in perfect silence, illuminated by the faint glow of our dying fire. Their porcelain faces reflected the flames, creating an eerie shimmer across the circle. I stumbled toward the tents, ripping them open to find my friends in chaos. Raphael was clutching his arm, his hand twisted in an unnatural angle. Bruno was on his knees, gasping for air, like something was squeezing his lungs. Diego and Mateus were pale, sweat dripping from their faces, both holding their chests as if trying to keep their hearts from bursting. "They're doing something to us," I managed to say through gritted teeth. We all crawled out into the open, huddling together, watching in horror as the dolls continued their slow, methodical movements. Around our copies, every time one of them touched a replica, a shoulder, a head, a leg, we felt it. Sharp pains, numbness, a creeping stiffness that spread through our bodies like we were being molded. Piece by piece, Bruno's voice cracked. "If they finish, we're done." The realization hit all of us at once. This wasn't just some haunting, this was a ritual. And we were the offering. I looked around desperately for anything that could give us a chance. The fire was dying, but it was still burning. I remembered how fragile the dolls looked, how delicate porcelain could shatter. "We need to break those copies," I whispered, my voice shaking. "How? We can't even move properly," Diego hissed, his legs barely holding him upright. I grabbed a burning branch from the fire, ignoring the heat searing my hand. "We don't have a choice." With every ounce of strength left, I charged toward the circle. The moment I crossed the invisible boundary, the dolls reacted. Their heads turned. In perfect unison, glassy eyes locking onto me. My body screamed in pain, my limbs growing heavier, as if invisible strings were pulling me down, but I kept going. I swung the burning branch at the nearest doll, shattering its face into pieces. A high-pitched sound, like 1,000 tiny bells, erupted from the impact, making my ears ring. The other dolls hesitated, their movements glitching, as if confused by the attack. "Now!" I shouted, my voice breaking. Bruno, Raphael, Diego and Mateus followed, grabbing whatever they could. Sticks, rocks, even parts of our camping gear, and began smashing through the circle, aiming for the 5 replicas at the center. Each strike came at a cost. Every time we hit one of the dolls, we felt sharp jolts of pain, like the ritual was trying to fight back, punishing us for interfering. My vision blurred, my legs threatening to give out, but I didn't stop. Bruno reached his own replica first. Without hesitation, he drove a jagged piece of wood straight through its chest. His scream echoed through the clearing as blood poured from his own mouth, but the doll crumbled to dust. One down, Raphael followed, tackling his copy to the ground and smashing its head with a rock until there was nothing left but shards. The dolls began to screech, a horrible, unnatural sound that vibrated through the air, making it hard to breathe. The sky above us seemed to darken, as if the night itself was closing in. I found my replica, standing there with that same blank stare. My hands trembled as I raised the burning branch one last time and brought it down across its face. The moment my replica shattered, a wave of cold swept through me, and I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air. One by one, we destroyed the last of the copies, each of us barely holding on to consciousness. As the final replica broke, the dolls surrounding us froze in place. For a heartbeat, everything was silent. Then, like fragile statues, the remaining dolls began to crack, thin fractures running along their porcelain skin until they all collapsed. Into dust, carried away by the wind. The forest was empty again. We lay there, too weak to move, staring at the sky as dawn began to break over the horizon. But deep down, we knew this wasn't over, because as the first light of morning touched the clearing, I noticed something half buried in the dirt beside me. A small, tattered ribbon, red and familiar. The same ribbon the child's doll wore on that cursed train. We didn't speak for a long time. What could we possibly say after surviving something like that? Our bodies were bruised, burned, and marked by pains no doctor could ever explain. But worse than the physical wounds was the weight pressing on our minds, the unshakable feeling that we hadn't truly escaped. By midday, we packed up what little was left of our gear. No one wanted to stay in that clearing a second longer. The paradise we had risked everything to find had turned into a nightmare we couldn't wake up from. The journey back to civilization felt endless. Every rustle of leaves made us flinch. Every shadow between the trees looked like it could come alive at any moment. But after 2 long days of walking, starving, exhausted, and broken, we finally saw the outline of the old town where it all began. When we reached the train station, something deep inside me begged not to look. I already knew what would be there, but of course I looked. The train was waiting, sitting silently on the rusted tracks, exactly as we had first seen it, still, patient, and in the passenger car. I saw them, 5 dolls, seated precisely where we had sat on that cursed day, dressed in the same clothes we wore when we boarded. Their features were flawless, frozen in lifeless expressions, glass eyes staring into nothing. It was us. A chill ran through my spine, colder than anything I'd felt in that forest. The others saw it too. No one said a word. We just stood there, paralyzed by the truth. We had jumped off that train. We had destroyed the replicas in the clearing, but somehow we never really left. As we turned to leave, I caught one last detail that made my blood run cold. In the window of the passenger car, half hidden by the curtain, was the little girl. The same glassy stare, the same tattered doll in her arms. She raised her hand slowly and waved. We walked away without looking back. But even now I know that train is still there, waiting for its next passengers, and I wonder if anyone ever truly gets off. If you made it this far, be careful next time you board a train to nowhere. Stories like this aren't always just stories. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what's coming next, because some journeys don't have a way back.